I would like to invite the last two speakers of the panel, and that is Professor Chuzhykov and Professor Fedirko from Kyiv National Economic University. Please. Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear Professor Moravska, first of all, thank you very much for invitation of this conference. Very interesting and very useful for future our relationship with cooperation by Jean Monnet society, new society. Our report devoted to problem of regional development of Ukraine, and first of all before revolution and before war. Despite the fact that more and more theories and concepts appeared in the leading development countries, for example, regional competitiveness, city region, beautiful places, creative cities, localization, and so on, Ukrainian national science used outdated ideas of planned regulation in improvement in market economy. The effect of government policies resembled core measure of the neoliberal model while maintaining a high degree of administration centralization. The well-known American expert Michael Storper proposed a model of territorial development in the context of globalization, which he called regional world. In his turn, Michael Keating from UK insisted on the idea of new regionalism, which was connected with the territorial restriction of Western Europe. The idea of optimizing the interrelations between national environment and administrative regions belonged to Michael Genius. Very interesting work Mark Genius devoted to problem of pure regionalism. The dawn of the 25th century was marked a number of sectoral shifts in regional methodology. In particular, a phenomenon of regional competitiveness was grounded with allowed Julian Bristow to propose the typology of regional strategies: diversity, dispersion, mutuality, and so on. Also, a concept of city region was proposed by Andres Rodriguez-Posse from London School of Economics, was established. A significantly increased interest in the non-productive sector of national economy resulted in the new modern concept of creative classes by Richard Florida and creative economy by John Hopkins. The methodological vacuum in which Ukraine found itself did not allow regions solve the existing problem by means of European economic convergence instrument. The main features of the neoliberal model of regional innovation development in Ukraine presented of next slide. The most important of them are preservation of Soviet-style thinking within the directorate model of regional development administration, metropolitan maximum of investment, and unstable regional innovation boom. For example, in Kyiv, we have very interesting statistical data, near 50% of FDI of Ukraine. Declaration of benefits of the European mechanism and instruments of development, and they enshafts financials. Now I would like to invite Associate Professor of Kyiv National University of Economics, Oleksandr Fedirko, to take the floor.
Thank you very much, dear ladies and gentlemen. I would like to take up the idea of my colleague and continue our analysis in terms of innovation factors of regional development in Ukraine. So in the graphical analysis presented below, we study the regional waves, or in other words, the fluctuations of innovative activities in Ukraine. We employed two spatial approaches to create the profile of regional innovative development from the east to the west of the country and from the north to the south. So in the first graph, you can see the dynamics of innovation products output, which is one of the main performance indicator for the regional innovation system. In the period from 2000 and to 2010, or even 11, these indicators were quite stable. The relevant leaders were Kharkiv, Poltava, and Lviv regions. However, the launch of new commodities production in Poltava region led to the significant upsurge of this indicator, which later appeared to have temporary nature. The second graph depicts two wave crests of innovation activity already in the dimension from the north to the south. And here the innovative leaders are Kyiv, which is in the beginning of this picture, and Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporozhye regions. And these trends may be explained by the significant modernization of the obsolete technological base in the industrial centers. The third graph depicts that the growing leadership in the innovation expenditures, mainly due to the purchase of new equipment, was enjoyed by Khmelnytsk region as well as Kharkiv region, which is last in this picture. The fourth graph unveils the trends of innovation expenditures from the north to the south of the country, with two stable peaks in the city of Kyiv, which is in the beginning, Dnipropetrovsk region in the center, as well as Zaporozhye region, which are well-known industrial hubs in Ukraine, and an ad hoc asymmetry in the Crimea, which is the last in this picture. At the same time, judging from graph 5, intellectual leadership belongs to Kharkiv region with its center in the city of Kharkiv, whose technological potential is insignificantly inferior to the capital of Ukraine. Graph 6 proves the capital city's leadership in terms of number of patents granted within the country, as well as regional leadership of Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, which is also a strong industrial hub. Moving to the conclusions, we can assume that Ukraine tends to implement a neoliberal rather than neo-Keynesian model of regional development due to the lack of regional planning and poor financing of regional projects, or better to say, close to zero state financing of regional projects. The second bullet point is that migration of creative staff to the capital city region and abroad aggravates intellectual disparities, whereas economic effects of the outsourcing of a number of companies are reaped far beyond the Ukrainian borders. Another problem connected with innovation activities is reluctance of business entities to invest in high-tech and innovation spheres. And this resulted in a quite deformed FDI sectoral structure, wherein the most of FDI were absorbed by the financial and banking sectors, trade and repair of household equipment. And also estimates concerning the growth of military exports for Ukraine remain quite unjustified. So thank you for your attention.
Yeah, so I guess I have a huge challenge here to summarize what we have discussed, and I think it's very, very difficult. I think we learned that we should, of course, be patient. We also learned that we have a quite challenging future ahead of us, maybe with 50 countries in the European Union. For some of the young generation, I see one very young here, might see even more than 50 countries in the European Union when she reaches my age. And thirdly, I think also regional disparities. We talked a lot about countries, but we also have regional disparities in countries still in the European Union, but also outside the European Union. And what you pointed in terms of Ukraine is very much similar, I would say, what we still observe in Latvia. So now everyone has been in the fairly stuffed Riga air, and I know you're going to breathe some fresh Baltic Sea air, and I guess a bus is around 7 o'clock from outside here to Jurmala? Do we have some time for questions? Then we have time for questions to Professor Bosco and to the two other presenters. Yes, please. Very good initiative. If we give you a microphone, even better.
In the meantime, the others will come up with additional questions. I have a provocative question. In terms of how far back does one go into history in defining borders? And you can well imagine what I mean by that. Because we have talked about the French Revolution, we have talked about the Russian Revolution, and at the end of the war, in fact, following the defeat of Nazi Germany, Ukraine got an additional piece of Poland that became part of Ukraine. Obviously, Poland got a part of Germany, so Poland moved west. But at the same time, in a way, Ukraine moved west also by gaining part of Poland. So now does this mean stability? In other words, it's obviously the question of Crimea and otherwise, but how far back does one really go? Because Crimea became part of Ukraine in 1954 or 55 when Khrushchev, I think, gave. So, but before that it was not, because as I remember, I studied in France, and in France one likes to study history. And as you know, one of the metro stations in Paris is Sebastopol, which is the result of, obviously, the Crimean War. And in French schools, you learn about the Crimean War quite a bit, when basically there were France, Germany, and Turkey were fighting Russia. And Sebastopol resisted for a long time, so it became a symbol. At the same time, Sebastopol became also a symbol of resistance of the Soviet Union to Nazi Germany in 1940 to 43, because it resisted for a couple of years before. So that's why I'm asking, now you understand why I'm asking that question. How far does one have to go back to define borders? I prefer not to answer it, but that's why I'm just raising it.
And do we have any comments from the panelists? Yeah. Me as chairman, my response would be, I think that's the beauty of European Union, actually, to try to take down these borders. And that, I think, is for me, the real reason for why I support European Union, that borders are gradually being taken down, and we have in terms of mobility, and I happen to go through a bit of a family archive, and also realizing that we are going back, at least in terms of mobility, to something pre-1914, when it was much easier for people to move and establish businesses in various parts of the world. So European Union is still too small, and that's why I'm very supportive of seeing the vision of 50 countries, because then there will be, I don't know how many borders, because there are more than 50 borders in Europe that we are gradually taking down. And this goes back to borders, a very pedagogical film I saw in my native Sweden in the fairly leftist 1970s was on peace, and it started kind of with the first fence or the first border being erected, and then came all the wars after that. So for me, European Union means borders gradually disappearing.
I'm very glad to hear that, because in fact I started working for the European Union, for Euratom, when there were 6 member states in 1963, and I worked until they became 28. So that I really saw that change. I was doing research, so I was not really involved in political things, but I could really see the results of it. And it's remarkable. In fact, I see it. I saw it from the inside, how remarkable the change has taken place. And how the mentalities have changed completely. And this is what I still have the feeling that there is still some difficulty on understanding the change of mentalities. And this is what one has to work on. Thank you.
Any more comments on this challenging issue? Oh, yes, please. We have one over here.
Just being a lawyer, I cannot miss a chance and to bounce to your a little bit provocative question. Again, this issue, very delicate issue of borders, territory, especially with reference to the to Crimea, is very sensitive. But we may answer from many points of view. Historical. Of course, Crimea for last 200 years has been a part of the Russian Empire. However, last 200 years, not before. Then cultural, ethnical, of course. Before the annexation, the Crimean Peninsula has been inhabited by mostly ethnic Russian-speaking people and former Soviet nationals, but as well as by quite substantive Tatar minority and Ukrainian minority too. If we gradually refer to the economic issues, of course, one of the reasons why, as you mentioned, Crimea was transferred from the Russian Federation in time of the Soviet Union to the Ukrainian Soviet Republic, it was because of the infrastructure. It was much easier to supply the Crimean Peninsula with water, electricity, and all necessary infrastructure directly from Ukraine, not from Russia. And we all know the reasons for it. But if we turn to the legal dimension of this issue, of course, there is no question, because in accordance with international law, there is a very sort of sacred principle of unavailability of borders and sovereignty. And of course, we must recall the ill-fated Budapest Memorandum, where 3 countries guarantors, including the Russian Federation, Great Britain, and the USA, guaranteed the state sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. And of course, there is the Helsinki Pact, which also was signed by the Soviet Union and the Russian Federation, a successor of this country, to preserve state borders. So it's actually, from legal point of view, there is no doubt about the violation of international law in this case. That's what I may add.
Hi, I'm Vidor from University of Victoria, Canada. I have a comment and a question for Mr. Bosco. You were mentioning that the USSR actually was quite and the Cold War itself was playing a big role in the EU enlargement. I would have to disagree with that, considering that the European community started more as a response to World War II, and also considering that most of the countries, actually more than half, joined the European Union after the end of the Cold War. If we see Sweden, Finland, and Austria, it seemed that they actually waited for not to upset Russia in some sort of way. Also on the basis of human rights and EU membership, which is based for the countries to actually fulfill certain obligations before they actually join. What makes you believe that the enlargement will go all the way until North Africa in some troubled countries? Thank you.
Well, the first question, I said that it was the American pressure which after, from the Marshall Plan onward, forced Germany and France mainly, and then Italy came in second, to solve these problems with peaceful means. But without the American input, Germany and France wouldn't decide to discuss to solve these problems in a peaceful way. And Jean Monnet provided the idea, the method. But Jean Monnet took this method from the Americans. I mean, the conversion of Jean Monnet, that is historical research, okay? Jean Monnet was a civil servant in London until 1940, and he was thinking just about his country, France. He was the president of the Anglo-French Supplies Committee, how to organize the defense, the war in between the two countries. Reading on the Times and Observer and on the British press, he saw a huge debate on the project of an Anglo-French federation because of a movement called the Federal Union. Then Jean Monnet picked up the phone, he called a friend of his who was called Morton, Secretary of Chamberlain, and then he proposed to Churchill the famous Plan of Union in 1940, June 1940. The French government said no. That was the first attempt by Jean Monnet to promote the European Union. But then he went to Washington, and it was in Washington. In the British embassy, it was Jean Monnet, between 1940 and 1943, was a British civil servant. It was not a French civil servant. And he was sent by Roosevelt in Algiers, but he served within the British Foreign Office during these years. And in this kind of environment of the American embassy, from 1940 to 1943, in which Lord Lothian was the ambassador, and Lord Lothian was the most important British federalist, ever existing. So Jean Monnet learned about the idea of a European federation in Washington, and then provided the French government, with the method of unifying, of pooling sovereignty. Pooling sovereignty in a sectoral way, in a functional way, starting from competence, very limited competence of the state. But it was an American input. We wouldn't do it without the Jean Monnet as our man, but converted by the Americans, and the American government forcing us to talk each other and to solve in that way, in a supranational way, our problems. And of course, at the end of the Cold War, many countries joined, but without the Cold War, we wouldn't have European Union. So it was the existence on our east border of the Soviet Union which forced us to get together, and we won the Cold War because of the European Union. If Germany and France remain divided, with Italy, within Italy, a very strong communist party which almost overtook, the ruling party, the Christian Democratic Party, well, we wouldn't have any European Union. So basically, without the unity of the West, the Cold War would be have won by the Soviet Union. That is the truth that we should remember in our studies. The second question about civil rights. Well, the civil rights are based on Western philosophy, German philosophy mainly, French, of course, Enlightenment. This is the base of our civilization. So all the world speak European, you know. Some people say, but I feel French, I feel Italian, I feel, well, yes, I feel Italian. But I feel Italian because of the contribution which my country in the last 2,000 years gave to the European culture. Think about the age of nationalism. The roots of nationalism are very superficial roots in the European culture, 400 years. 400 years compared to 2,500 years, if you include the 5th century Greece, of unity. There is a very long tradition of unity in European culture. And this is the culture of the world. If you want or not, all the world, China, India, Brazil, all the world speaks European. All the world share our values, ideologies, capitalism, science. That is but we should remember that all the world is experiencing now was created here, was experienced here first. You know, that is important. So that is our contribution to the world unity. You know, the foundations of our identity, were created here, in this part, in this region of the world, and then the world accepted. So I think that that is the fundamental reason for enlargement, because, countries which want to get in, they don't want to get in to get more money, to become more richer. Yes, of course, also to get more stable. But they want to get in because they recognize in our lifestyle, the ideal lifestyle, even if there are many things in each country which are not working correctly. Well, that is, at least is by my point of view.
Okay, thank you. One final comment here.
Just a very short final remark.
Yeah.
On the biography of Jean Monnet. Since we have some Canadian friends here, you have to remember that originally, in fact, the father of Jean Monnet, who was a cognac merchant, sent Jean Monnet to Canada to sell cognac. And it's throughout traveling through Canada where he realized the concept of federation. Because basically there was obviously already the French-Canadian and the British-Canadian, and that developed there a little bit his concept of working together in terms of a loose federation. In Jean Monnet's mind, it developed while he was in Canada as a young man, because he was sent when I think he was 20 or 21 for a number of years to Canada to sell cognac.
Okay. Yeah, okay, very, very...
Professor Bosco, in his speech, said one thing: what's the fundamental question about the Russians' mission in the world? I can remind only one fact, that Russian Federation was among the main founders of the United Nations that now form the modern international ruling. And we just recently celebrated the opening of the Second Front. But I remind you that it was opened in 1944, and the war started much earlier, and the main pressure on this was taken on the behalf of the USSR and Russian Federation. And Article 2 of the United Nations Charter says that nations had the right to self-determination, and this practice, whether you want it or not, but does happen. And the cases we had before and the case we have now, and the Crimea case is not an exception. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for all the interventions, and I would like to thank Professor Moravska for organizing such a good conference, because it's the first one ever where there has been such a willingness to discuss at a late hour. Thank you very much, all of you, and have a nice evening. And I guess a discussion can continue on the buses or bus which is waiting outside.